Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Just wanted to say hi and thank you for joining us on Lead, Thrive, Revive. My name is Lee Felton, and I am, really passionate about authentic leadership and enabling people to see leaders in every organization for who they are. And I have teamed up with Dr. Diane. She is a specialist psychologist trained in burnout. And so we've been doing this for a couple of weeks now. Dr. Diane, just, take a second, say hi, introduce yourself.
Hello, Lee, and hello, everyone out there. I'm thrilled to be together with you. I'm always having a sparky conversation whenever we get together, and I really appreciate that. And as you said, I am trained as an organizational psychologist, and one of my passions recently has been looking at this issue of burnout, which is so pervasive in our workplaces, at home these days, but especially for BIPOC and queer folks. Those are the folks that I feel are closest to my heart. And I think there's a way in which burnout lands differently for those groups. And I want to include in that neurodivergent folks as well. And so I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have today. And we're continue to explore how do we transform burnout and how do we build those skills of emotional resilience for
I'm
the
really
long
excited
term.
about it as well. And I think it might be my network. Good morning. It might be my
I
network.
can hear you. There was a little
Can
bit
you
of
hear
a
me?
lag, but I can hear you fine now.
Well, I'm sure it was me, and that everybody heard all of the amazing words that you had to share. But I think it's what's really interesting to me is the way you and I met was through the community partners, through Microsoft. Just trying to understand and learn from individual leaders in the community. And you and I just had something in common that I didn't even know was related, and that is being authentic, showing up as yourself actually can combat burnout. That was what we talked about in the first two sessions. That is what you teach about. I think you also have like you have a playbook on it, or a set of tools that go along with that. And so that's what we have been talking about. And today I wanted to dive into probably a topic that not many people have approached, which is there a such thing as being too authentic? Is
Mm,
there such thing as being too transparent? And as you think about the fact that there's a huge correlation to burnout and masking or not being your authentic self, um, can burnout also come as a result of you being too vulnerable?
right. This is such a good question. Thank you for asking it. I think it is, we've been placing so much emphasis on that. So let's look at the other side of it. Is it possible to be too authentic? So I was thinking a little bit about this question. And so the follow-up question that came up in my mind was, well, too authentic for what, right?
Mm,
Too authentic for the social situations that you're placing yourself in, whether at home or at work, right? And so for me, that my first response to that, which we'll unpack, is yes, and
okay.
which may not be what you expected me to say, but yes, and so let's
Okay.
see what do I mean by that, right? So in business contexts, right, we often talk about product market fit, right? And
Yes.
so,
Okay.
right, and
Yes.
so here, maybe if I could extend that concept of product market fit or adapt it to this situation or this conversation, maybe we can talk about persona situation fit, something
Okay.
like that, right? And so that here, I think there's helpful to make a distinction between our social persona and our true selves. And we've been talking about this, right?
Okay.
We are mammals, we're social animals. So we figure out how to be in the world by watching the others around us, right? This is
Okay.
good, this is natural, but sometimes we take it to an extreme. We focus solely on external signals of who we need to be, who our social personas need to be to succeed in a particular environment, but to the complete exclusion, right, of our true selves. And
Okay,
so
right.
when we suppress our genuine selves, we know there's a cost. And we've been saying burnout is the suppression of authenticity, the suppression of our emotions. And if you're BIPOC, if you're queer, if you're neurodivergent, you know this. It takes a lot of energy, as you said, right? To be closeted, to mask, to code switch, right? And so, even worse, if you're part of any one of these groups, at times we're paying attention vigilantly to these external signals that are based in racism, homophobia, misogyny, neurotypicality, right? Signals that don't actually serve us and aren't true, right? So, so there are some emotion scientists who talk about our body budgets, right? So our body's energetic budget.
Okay.
When we're authentically who we are, we add to our body budget. We replenish our bodies. We recharge our
What is the
battery.
body budget? Does that mean that you have so much? I mean, is that an energy based thing? Is that
Yeah.
an emotional, mental based thing? Like what is the budget?
I think
What's
the
currency?
easiest way to think about it is like the currency is energy, right? And
Okay.
emotions do affect that energetic budget that our body has, right? And so the hypothesis that I'm offering here is that when we are authentically who we are,
Mm-hmm.
we replenish our body's energy budget, right? We recharge our batteries. When we are embodying or performing a social persona that isn't in alignment with who we are genuinely, then we're conflicted internally, and to some degree we're at war with ourselves. So there's an energetic cost to that.
Okay.
Right? So when you ask whether there's such a thing as being too authentic,
Right.
then the answer is yes, but the question is too authentic for what? The social situation that you're putting yourself in.
Okay.
And the question then becomes, what situations are you putting yourself in, and why? Is the energetic expenditure that you are putting out there for your social persona, is it worth the expenditure or not, right? Just in a purely like energetic investment sense.
So you're saying being too authentic, too transparent can actually cost you part of your body budget.
If two things. If one, the authenticity is not in alignment with the social persona that's needed for that situation.
Okay.
And if those two things are not in your social persona and your authentic, genuine self are not overlapping or aligned or the same. So there's two ways that the energy leaks there, right? The energy leaks there if the persona is not aligned with the situation.
Mm.
And it also leaks if your true self and your persona are not aligned or clicked into each other. Does that
I hope it makes sense to the audience. It definitely makes sense to me. And what comes across very clearly is our bodies, our mental health, our energies, our just who we are is a very complicated but interwoven set of situations that that make our personality or that make our mental state.
Mm-hmm, for certain. And it's all interdependent, right? So when you said earlier, what is the currency of the body budget? Is
Mhm.
it energy? Is it emotions? Well, energy and emotions are interdependent, right? So it is complex, but if we just to keep it simple, if you just think of the body budget as energy, how do you put energy into the budget, and what activities spend your energy, right? And so that's where it's connected to burnout, right? Because if you are performing a social persona all day long that is not congruent with who you truly are, that's an expenditure of energy. If your social persona, like let's say you're being really, really authentic at work, but it's not necessarily appropriate to the situation or appropriate to the people who are there. Like, for example, if the people who are present in that situation are not safe people to be authentic with for
Okay.
whatever reason,
Okay.
then that's also an issue, right? So That's why I'm saying yes, and because it takes a little bit of wisdom and discernment to see is whatever persona that we're in, is it appropriate to the situation, and is it worth whatever energy I'm expending towards that?
I sincerely appreciate that, because I think, we hear all the time, bring your authentic self to work, bring your authentic self to work. And even from leaders who say this, it doesn't feel like they're giving you the space
Mm,
without consequence
mm,
to be authentic.
right.
And so what I hear from you is, yes, there's a cost by not being authentic, by masking, by playing a character or a persona, but it could be even a bigger or equal cost leading to burnout if you are authentic, transparent, and vulnerable to somebody who basically doesn't deserve or warrant
Mm.
you as a person.
That's one aspect of it for sure.
Okay.
Right. And another, so there's the safety aspect and the trust, am I placing my trust in the right place?
Mhm.
Right. Sometimes we have, those allies at work, right, and that you have been through ups and downs with, and they've shown up for you, you've shown up for them, and you can feel that sense of trust, right? That's not always the case,
Right.
right? Especially if you're a member of these various groups. So you have to be discerning about it, right? So that's the one element of the persona situation fit, right? Is it appropriate right now, right? Another aspect of it is that, uh, uh, what situations am I placing myself in? If all of the time that you're in, are in situations where you're not, you're mainly playing a persona that's not aligned with who you are, then you have to ask yourself why. Why am I placing myself in that? Why am I not choosing other situations in which I can be more of my true self more of the time? So again, I'm trying to say that there's a time and a place for everything, right? And so, if we have a specific goal, uh, the example that's coming to my mind, I was an executive director for a nonprofit for over a decade, right? And so, uh, in that situation, let's say if I'm trying to make a strategic partnership, or I'm trying to raise money, or there's the right combination, right, of the social persona of the executive director that I had to play to exude, the confidence that people need to have in me in order to entrust me with resources. And there's also, my genuine self. Hopefully, most of the time when I'm playing that role, I'm
I was
being
just about to say, Dr. Diane, I was just about to say that executive director
yes,
persona, that leader persona, I couldn't imagine you having to mask to be that.
right, and that's
It's
and
like it is to me, and the person that I know, it is naturally part of your authentic self, and that compassion, that empathy, understanding. That's what a leader brings to the table, and that is also authentically you. So
right.
I don't
So you
necessarily see a
you
conflict
grow in
there.
your power as a leader, right? I was more effective as a leader when I was able to find ways to bring more of my authentic self meld into that persona. You shared a quote with me earlier that you gave for an interview, right? And it was about, can I read it? I don't know if
No,
you want
because
me
it's
to.
not published yet.
Oh, okay, never mind. But I'll just say the theme that I took away with it was that, you know, when we show up authentically as leaders in these various spaces, in the right appropriate situation with people that we can entrust with that,
Mhm.
it gives people who are in that space permission to be authentic as well, right? And then
Right.
what the persona of what an executive director or an executive leader looks like starts to look like us. And we
Right.
can't underestimate the power of that, right? Because that's how, especially if you're a leader, you are in a very visible position. You're setting the tone for your team. You're setting the tone for your organization. By you doing that, you are giving people permission for that. You said earlier, some people that you might entrust with that authentic part of you, don't actually give space for that. They say that bring your authentic self to work, but they actually in practice don't give space for that. But that's where we can be different as leaders, right? We can practice that first by figuring out and tuning into, our true selves and seeing what are the ways that we can meld those, social personas more with who we actually are internally, if that makes sense.
And how does, I mean, I love this concept. And because I've always, I used to tell my kids, I wake up in the morning, I have this much patience. Depending on how the day goes, it will chip away, chip
Yes.
away, chip away until, and my level of no patience means, I'm not dealing with this. But it will just chip away to the point it's like, I'm going to go somewhere because my patience is gone and this is not okay. How would you associate? So I love this concept that you've talked about, which is your body budget. And so I use it as my patience scale, but part of that is energy. And so you wake up, whether you wake up or whether you meditate or whatever you do to replenish your energy, how does that body budget relate to burnout? Is it when your body budget gets to the point where it's been so depleted, negatively depleted, that you can't actually replenish it? Or how do those two things
Yeah,
relate
I
together?
mean, it's this, right? That's why the budget metaphor is so useful, right? If you're overspending, if you're spending more energy than the resources that you actually have, right? That I think that intuitively makes sense. That would be burnout, right? Uh, when you're overspending, when you're spending more than than your actual resources. And so, the question is, how are we replenishing that? Not just waiting until we're in that deficit position, right? And deep, we can get pretty deep into that deficit position, right? So we don't want to get to that, right? And you mentioned earlier tools, playbooks. Yes, there are science-backed tools, and I hope over the series we can continue to, identify and talk about those. But there are science-backed tools that can help us replenish throughout the day, throughout the week, so that we don't hit that really horrible deficit position on our body budget, right? But the key thing I want to go back to, even though the currency of the body budget is energy,
Right.
right? Energy is not just physical energy, right? It's mental, emotional, spiritual energy, if you want to call it that, right? There's all these dimensions of energy, but it's just easier in the beginning to start thinking about the physical part of it, because oftentimes that's what people relate to when they're thinking about burnout, right? I'm out of gas, etc. But burnout is also, that sense of lack of motivation, lack of engagement with your work, lack of a sense of meaning. That's why we go back to the root of it. The physical is the symptom. The root of it is a suppression of your authenticity.
So can you tell me, I mean, I think that is beautifully explained, and I think, and hopefully helpful to the audience. And, you and I discussed at the last session, we were talking about your body compass. And so there's body budgets, there's body compasses. Hopefully, we're making a map of these things. And at some point, we bring them together. So
Exactly.
yeah, so body budget, body compasses. And one of the things that, as we were even talking about the body compass piece, I had, explained that, well, I have some trauma, so I don't quite want to revisit my that depth of negative energy. How does trauma relate to your body budget?
That is a really good question. I thought about both things, but this is giving me a chance to put them together right? A little bit here on the
Diane,
right here.
we're going to have engaging dialogue. This is just going to
I
be
love it. I told you, I said, that's what I count on when I talk to you, right? It's like the sparkiness of the conversation. So your question was, how does trauma relate to body budget?
Yes.
So let me, if I could, think out loud a little bit here, right? And so part of what happens with trauma, the people in the scientific study of trauma, is that our body's natural stress cycle, or the way that our body, like if there's a stressor, and trauma is an extreme form of that, right?
Okay.
So there's an extreme form of stress that's called trauma. Our body responds to it. But what happens with trauma is that our natural way of responding to it and coming back to balance gets frozen, right? It's like the stress cycle doesn't complete is one way that people talk about it. So that bouncing back, the natural resilience, the natural intelligence of the body that knows how to bounce back from stress when it's a
So
severe.
if we use the body budget as we continue with that metaphor of the body budget, you're saying that trauma can freeze certain parts of that budget where it can't be it can't be tapped into, so that those resources can't be tapped into.
Well, yeah, in a way, I mean, I think we can keep, peeling back the layers here, right? But
Yeah.
like, so with most stress, ordinary stress, and I'm not talking about traumatic stress, right?
Okay.
You have a stress, and if you let it, your body knows how to bounce back from that. And so it's about learning about what that stress cycle is and how we naturally bounce back and supporting that and allowing that natural process to happen. However, when it's a traumatic situation where the stress is so extreme, our body's natural way of bouncing back is not completed, right? It's kind of frozen at a particular stage of the cycle, right? So if I'm relating here for the first time with y'all about how does that connect to the body budget, the process of, maybe it's like something like the process of replenishing the battery is a little bit somewhat blocked, you could say, right? Or like, and it could also be that the expenditure of energy is like more than it's appropriate for the situation, right? So like, let's say, how, if you're having a trauma, if you're feeling triggered, right? Because something is triggering an old trauma, right? Yes. Your reaction might be much bigger.
So it can have two effects. It can, trauma, depending on the scale of it, can quickly deplete all your body budget. Quickly just take all of
because you're reacting to the old trauma, and it may or may not be appropriate.
All those resources to try to protect you.
Right. That's one way of thinking about it, right? And also the way that we replenish maybe could be hindered in some way. Now, hey, everybody, listen, I'm thinking out loud here on the spot. I appreciate the question because it's really helping me think about it. So I would love to even think about it more and continue the conversation. But in this moment, that's my first thought.
And it makes total sense to me, because it's not just that the trauma is blocking you from replenishing some of that budget, but also those triggers can completely deplete you. And if it depletes you, just like you said, if you get to a negative P&L, you're in the deficit big time, then that's where you can, you go through potentially some significant issues.
Absolutely. Yes. And so yeah, the triggers can deplete you a lot because your reaction may or may not, may be overreacting to what's actually happening because of it's reminding you of something that happened in the past, right? So that's one way, right? And then also like the replenishing of the body budget, the replenishing of your energy. So much of our energy, when it's spent suppressing things, you're expending a lot of energy pushing something away that has a cost energetically, right? And so, in therapy and other types of healing, therapy is just one of them, an important one, but other types of healing, that's what you're kind of trying to work on, like trying to, in a very well-held and contained situation, start to explore that, and so my hat's off, to all those people who are working on that, the healers, as well as the people working on their healing, because it does take up a lot of our energy. And so when we think again about BIPOC folks, queer folks, neurodivergent folks, right? We have layers upon layers of lived experience, right? Of various harms and traumas that have happened to us. We don't even know how much energy we are spending keeping our guard up all the time, right? And instead of, we're using that energy to keep the guard up instead of using that energy to propel us, further forward into our dreams, right? So this is the process of healing that we're working on together?
I am moved. I relate heavily.
Mm.
As you know, I identify as a neurodiverse, queer, Black female.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I took those identities out,
Mm-hmm.
my parents are from the Bible Belt, South Mississippi, right?
Mm-hmm.
I spent time there. I grew up in Washington State. I mean, so we are so complex that even if we took out the identities of these communities, BIPOC communities, gender orientation, even if we took out all of those identities, our lived experiences, our people that we've surrounded ourselves with, friends, family, children, all of those things add an extra layer of complexity to how we experience or interpret the world. So I know we only have
Yes.
a couple more minutes. I don't
Sure.
see any questions in the IM. And so if anybody has questions, feel free to ask it in the IM window. But until that, I'm curious with just a couple minutes left, is there any tip or trick or just any advice you would give to the audience about this body budget? And
Mm.
in any aspect of it, whether it's about replenishing it, whether it's about understanding your body budget, whether it's about how your body budget depletes, is there any advice you could give the audience about how to think about or work on
Yes.
and strengthen their body budget?
Well, I think first of all, for me, even just that term, that idea, thinking about my day in that way has helped me tremendously, right? So from the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep. So when I wake up, you can feel, oh, how much was my body replenished by rest or not, right? And so, and then all throughout the day, is the activity that I'm currently doing, is it replenishing me or is it depleting me? And just paying attention to that all throughout the day, right? So, oh, I wake up. Did I rest enough? Replenish or deplete? What am I eating for breakfast? What am I doing? I'm having this conversation with Leigh, but I'll tell you right now, I'm feeling replenished because there's some connection of genuineness that's happening in our exchange, and it's connected to my sense of purpose and your sense of purpose, and we can feel it, and so that's replenishing, right? And so even just the notion of a body budget and just starting to look at your daily activities from that perspective of like what's replenishing you and what is depleting you, right? And then just that lens alone will reveal so many insights for you. And then the question then becomes, well, why am I not doing more of the things that are replenishing my budget? Or why am I doing so many things that are depleting my body budget? And then playing around with the percentages of, of what kinds of activities are doing either of those things. We're adults here. We know that we can't do everything all the time that's just replenishing the budget. But when you do expend energy, the question is it worth it? Is it worth it to you and your well-being? Is it bringing you closer to your purpose? Whatever that might be, or a sense of meaning. If you don't have a sense of what that purpose is, does it feel meaningful to you?
Right.
Paying attention to that alone, I'm curious. For those of you who are watching this, try it out, right? See what happens when you look at your life in that way, and then start to curate the things that you're doing with your day based on that. What happens?
And I can tell you that there are times where the replenishing of that body budget is still rewarding. It's like when I have a body budget, if I have the opportunity, I am somewhat of a recluse. I like to be at home wherever that home is.
Yes.
And sometimes I have to force myself to get out. I have to force myself to be around people, to socialize. And it is those times, even though that socializing and that speaking, I do a lot of presentations and workshops and those things, they deplete my budget.
Sure.
But
is it worth it?
It's worth it.
There it is.
I love that concept that depleting your body budget or using that energy. It's not like you're trying to, hoard it and save it. It's like
No,
use it,
use it.
use it on
Yes.
things that are fulfilling.
Right, right. Because even though it's depleting you on one level, like, yes, yeah, speaking, socializing can deplete you on one level, but on another level of meaning, it is also replenishing you. So activities can be doing both also. And so how do we move more towards more of our life being in that place than far in the other direction where we're spending our energy, but it's not towards our goals or our purposes or meaning? Then what's the point of that? We want to spend our energy, but spending it wisely is the question.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. And yes, we're out of time. And it goes by every single time it goes by fast. And that's why I
It
look forward to
does.
these quick conversations, because even in just a brief period of time, there's so much to unravel. There's so much to learn and discover about yourself, about myself. And so always appreciate and love the conversation and appreciate you, Dr.
I
Diane,
appreciate
and sharing
you.
your
Thank
wisdom.
you.
Okay.
All
Thank you
right.
all for joining
Thanks,
us.
everybody.
Yes,
See you
this
next
is Lead,
time.
Thrive, Revive. We're here every other week. So please, looking forward to joining you in a couple of weeks. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Okay. See you everybody.